Thanks very much, and good morning, everyone. Over the last 18 months, we've seen social media giant Meta use AI to predict the structures of some 600 million proteins. NVIDIA, which is, I'm sure you all know, produce gaming chips, have launched a drug discovery company called Clara Discovery. Alphabet raised $1 billion for investment in Verily, its life science offshoot. And this week, we just saw Insilio Medicine, with funders from the Chinese conglomerate Foxley Group and Johnson & Johnson, announced trials on a drug discovered solely through AI. We've known for a long time about the convergence between science and technology, but we're increasingly seeing it play out in investment decisions. And we heard about the importance of that from the Minister just now. So we run a life science research program at Bidwell's, and we look at how the sector's evolving. And really what we're trying to do is better understand the implications for location and property-specific demand. Working with YouGov, and my thanks, I'm hoping he's here, Darren Yaxley at YouGov, for his ongoing work with Bidwell's, we've been tracking the growing relationship between science and technology and that convergence in the surveys that we've been undertaking over the last few years. In this current piece of work that I'm going to talk about today, we asked R&D leads across a number of large life science companies and a number of smaller ones as well this time about their use of technology. And from this survey, it's evident that we're at an inflection point in this convergence story. So we can no longer have science without technology. This convergence presents a challenge for the UK, and in particular, how we capitalise upon our R&D strengths by scaling businesses, and we've already heard about that this morning. We're yet to create our first big tech company, but our survey clearly identifies a tremendous opportunity for the UK. Sarah Hayward, who from Advanced Oxford, who is advised on this research and is chairing the session next, we'll be speaking to some of those in the front line of that convergence just in a moment, but I'm just going to set the scene from our research. Advances in technology, availability of data, and as we've talked about that role of the NHS, and also the challenges facing drug discovery and the costs involved in that really came through in our previous research. And these have coalesced to propel convergence in the scientific arena and therefore amongst businesses as well. In this study, YouGov conducted surveys with life science companies, 34 leading scientists across the country, and really just to try to get their views across a series of technology types. And we focused on AI and machine learning, robotics and automation, software, and quantum computing that we heard a little bit about this morning. We're going to be publishing this research, but I just wanted to pick out a few key findings for today. So most businesses we surveyed, irrespective of their size, were already making use of the technology in some form or other within their R&D at the moment. But as you'd expect, larger companies are the ones that are making better use of it at the moment, and it's more integrated into their processes. Robotics and automation is the most commonly used technology, and a quarter of those using it, it's absolutely integral in their activity. AI and the precursor to this, the machine learning side, is slightly less established within life science, and particularly amongst the smaller companies. And a fairly similar picture for software as well. Across all areas of technology, it's predominantly provided by a mix of collaboration of in-house teams and external providers. So that collaboration point I'm going to come back to in a minute. So that's the position now, but we're obviously at a very early stage at the moment. The survey clearly demonstrates life science companies are expecting increasing convergence over the coming years between the science and technology, and that's across the board, and particularly in the areas of AI, machine learning, and robotics and automation. I just wanted to make a very quick comment on quantum computing, because I'm nowhere near as qualified to talk about it as our previous speaker. But no one, as we expected, no one is using that at the moment in their R&D. But there are a small number, and particularly larger companies, who are starting to think about that at the moment. And clearly the expertise within the country is going to help that, and the Challenge Fund that we spoke about earlier. So across the board, in all these areas of technology, it's the importance of our respondents placed on collaboration, which was really notable, and particularly when looking to the future. The survey indicates that we'll see far lower levels of solely in-house delivery and far more external teams. Within the software sector, which actually a fair amount of that is produced in-house at the moment, there's a real sharp rise in terms of the complete outsourcing of activities. This growing use of external parties probably reflects expectations of a greater depth of providers in the market, particularly as the respective areas of technology advance over the coming years. This, of course, means that considering the future for life science landscape, the nature and location of these technology partners really matters. The survey showing regular meetings between partners, as we spoke about earlier, that community aspect of it is important. We can see from this chart, which details the current makeup of technology delivery, the nature of the provider or partner is very much dependent on the technology. The role of universities and other research institutes from the emerging areas of machine learning, as we know well from our take-up and requirements figures, is really important aspect across Oxford and Cambridge. Most striking is the role of big tech and larger corporates as well here, though, particularly in the areas of the robotics, automation, and AI and machine learning, which, as it happens, also are the areas where they're most likely to be outsourcing now and particularly in the future. It's perhaps not surprising, therefore, that our respondents reported that on average 60% of their technology partners are already located outside the UK. For sure, therefore, there is greater complexity ahead, and the boundaries between life sciences are going to be increasingly blurred with technology. And I suppose what we expect is to see a range of models evolve. We've been working with Bowhurst looking at M&A activity across life science and technology, and what is really clear there is the increasing crossover between the two sectors over the last 3 years when compared to the previous 3-year period. Both tech and life science companies in the UK will be targets for this M&A activity. So perhaps what's most notable from our survey results is that when presented with statements, whether they agree or not agree, our respondents tend to be more on the side of tech companies taking the leading role rather than the science operations. This dynamic may, of course, evolve as the technology advances, and also, of course, as the financial situation changes over and the pressures impact that we're currently seeing. However, it is very clear that big tech and wider technology corporates already have momentum behind them into the move into life sciences. And we can't be in any doubt that the convergence of technology and science will be disruptive and has the potential to change the sector's centre of gravity. The role of overseas partners is particularly focused in the area of robotics and to a slightly lesser extent AI, with the US and its stronghold on big tech a major focus of the activity. But the UK is in a very strong position to benefit from all of this. The digital transformation that continues to rely on human talent at the multiple levels, as we spoke about earlier, and also university and research institute R&D is a real critical mass for the UK, as we spoke about. We punch above our weight in those areas. And in particular, the spin-out activity will be important, which we are good at initially commercialising that research. So those global assets are a real strength, as well as the wider R&D. Plus, of course, we have the NHS, as Sir John mentioned earlier, and that unified system with the potential for real R&D advantage. And, of course, it benefits the patients here as well. And the fact is that our research clearly tells us that companies would prefer their tech collaborators to be located here because they are collaborators, they're partners, they're not just providers. Overseas technology businesses have built functions to capture the benefits of R&D and are locating within the UK. And as we've already mentioned, however, it's the ability to retain and scale our own tech in order to capture this full potential that's going to be so important going forward. If we capitalise on the change and the opportunity ahead, the opportunity is enormous for the country as a whole. Life science companies are more flexible in their tech collaborators than might be the case when we've talked in the past about science collaboration. They are willing to look at a further reach in terms of their tech collaborators. So cross-sector collaboration will continue to happen within clusters, and that's illustrated by work, for example, between Adam Brooks and Microsoft in their Cambridge research lab that's based on Cambridge Science Park and CB1. They're using AI to cut radiotherapy treatment times. So the cluster activity will continue, but cities and towns across the UK, particularly within a 2-hour distance of a cluster, and of course those physical assets we talked about earlier, which are across the country as a whole, are going to be really important and offer a real strength. And the research clearly demonstrates that locations across the UK have the opportunity to benefit from that disruption that we're going to see over the coming years. But it's going to be the nature of these collaborative relationships that will determine the direction of travel from the inflection point we face now. Powering both life sciences and technology is going to be fundamental to the UK's economic future. I look forward to hearing the discussion in the next section, and thank you very much for your time.